All right. So we'll do a couple more sections of these slides, and that'll be it for today. Unless there are questions, but I don't imagine it'll take too long. All right. So here's other security properties that are important, although they're not as fundamental and essential as confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But there are other things you would like in a secure system. One of them is non-repudiation. This means you cannot deny what you did. Like I said, you don't want your administrator to do something and then delete the log and get away with it. There needs to be some kind of record they can't delete. That's what you get here. So, and you can't make a financial agreement without non-repudiation. You mortgage your home, you sign a document. If you don't pay, they take your house. You're going to try to get out of it. They have to say, nope, you can't deny that you may sign this agreement. And so we do that with digital signatures. That was the point of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act under Clinton in '98. They made it possible to make signatures online that would have the same force as a normal signature with a pen. So now you could do financial agreements and loans over the internet. All right, and least privilege means that people should only have the privilege to do what they need to do for their job. They should not have more privileges than they need, because all they'll do is get in trouble. That's a general principle. And need to know is another one, where not only do they have a level of security that meets their job requirements, but there's also what's called horizontal control, saying even though you are, say, cleared to top secret, you're only working in Japan, so you have no need to know what's going on in Africa. So even though you're technically cleared to top secret, you don't have access to all top secret files, but just the ones that are horizontally in your need to know range. That's another control there. And this is what happened in the 1990s. There was a lot of horizontal controls in the military, in the United States intelligence. And the result is they did not see 9/11 coming. And afterwards they said, you know, if these guys could put together their information with these guys and these guys, we would have seen it coming. So they took them down. So now all people could reach all the information at the certain clearance, all took down the horizontal controls. So then, because of that, Bradley Manning could get all this stuff. He was a junior, he was a private in Hawaii, and yet he had access to all these cables all over the world, and he dumped them all to WikiLeaks. And he wouldn't have had access to them, except they took down the horizontal controls, so then they put them back up again. And you know, this shows what I was saying. There's no right answer in security. Everything you do has a good side and a bad side. And often you end up lurching from one position to another and another. That's kind of the way it is. So how do we prevent people signing things under duress? And is this legal? Well, that's an interesting question. Well, there's nothing to prevent people from being forced to sign things with a pen or to sign things digitally. And it's, of course, not legal. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I think you can go to court and say, I was forced to sign it, and that will be a defense. But it's a good question. Yeah. What's that?
There is no meeting of the minds if it's signed under duress.
Meeting of the minds?
The contract is a meeting of the minds.
Oh, well, it might be, but it mainly is a financial deal, right? You give me some money now, and I promise to give you the payments later, or this bad thing will happen. But this guy said, what if you were coerced into signing it, or deceived into signing it? Then you can try to defend yourself at those things in court. And yeah. Yep, good. I see what you mean about meeting of minds. Good. All right.
It's a legal term.
Oh, it's a legal term, is it? Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate the help. By the way, don't be shy. Speak up if you know something. I'm not under the impression that I know everything. So students often know things I don't. All right. So a subject is an active entity that's trying to do something, like you're trying to open a file. An object is the thing you're trying to get at, like get at a piece of paper or something. This is the attempt to have access to something. The subject attempts to access an object, and then you consult an access control list to see whether they should be allowed to do that or not. So in Internet Explorer, for example, if you're running Internet Explorer in memory, I guess it's Edge these days, then it is a subject accessing data. But this, when not running, is a file sitting on a disk, the Internet Explorer executable. And often things are not so clearly in one category or the other. Like most computers nowadays are both servers and clients. They're providing data to another machine, and they're also taking data from a machine above them, so they don't serve just one role. All right, and somebody has a link. California has a new law about NDAs. Oh, that's interesting. Let me bring it up. New California law. Oh, yes. Oh, I heard it restrict NDAs. I knew that we didn't have non-competes, but I didn't know there was a new law about NDAs. Well, that's interesting. I don't know anything about it, but that's a good thing to know. I'll save that around and add that to my links later. Thank you. All right. So defense in depth, this means you have not just one defense, but you have more defenses behind it. So there's a firewall, but if they penetrate that, there's another firewall behind it and things like that. That's what most networks have now. They have an enterprise level firewall protecting the whole network, and then they're running local software firewalls in every machine. And there can be other types of defense in depth, so that if someone penetrates one control, there are other controls before they will get to the really important stuff. Due care is doing what a prudent person would do, not being stupid or careless. That's the prudent man rule. Due diligence is management of due care, where you have a process to make sure that these stupid things are not happening on your network. This is actually the main thing you can do for security. This is a general fact. All the fancy glamorous stuff, like learning about zero-day attacks and buying complicated devices, is not what really makes you secure. Mostly what makes you secure is just plain old hygiene. Make sure that your employees are actually locking the door. Make sure that they're changing the default passwords. Boring, simple things like that. The people aren't making stupid mistakes is usually the best thing you can do for security. And it's very hard to stop people from doing stupid things. Like just talk, doctors will tell you, most disease is preventable. If you would just eat better, not smoke, not drink, get some exercise to prevent all these diseases, it would do more than all the vaccines in the world if you could just get people to stop doing stupid things, but that's not easy. Anyway, all right, so gross negligence is the opposite of due care. When you do something ridiculous and dangerous that gets you in trouble. So you may have legal consequences. If you have a breach and you lose data, then it will be determined in court whether you were guilty of gross negligence, or whether you can say we did take precautions up to the industry standard, so we were not guilty of gross negligence. And you will have to defend these statements in court. That's why a lot of companies don't really understand security. What they do is they just do what the other companies around them are doing, without thinking much, because then they can defend that in court. At least that lowers their legal liability. All right, isn't changing passwords passé now? Yes, the US government's official recommendation was that you had to change your password every 30 or 90 days, and they retracted that about 2 years ago, but nobody seems to be paying attention, and all my clients are still making me change my password every 30 days. It's very annoying. But you're right, it is technically no longer recommended, but nobody seems to have noticed this yet. Anyway, so abstraction is another concept where you group objects together. Instead of assigning permissions to individuals, you sort them into groups, like managers, help desk, sales, and then you assign permissions to the whole groups. This is a way to organize things. Data hiding will put data in a logical storage compartment that's not seen. So you can, it's the same thing as grouping things, grouping objects, not subjects, grouping things together. Right, and then encryption, of course, by encryption is scrambling data so that nobody can read it except authorized people who have the key or are allowed to get in there. All right, let's try another Kahoot, which would be one of these pages here, right there. All right, 1B is what I want, and there it is. Good. You had 11 last time. I guess we'll have something like that this time. 11 minus the people who already fell asleep. The icons are cute. Those are new. they've been apparently getting some money. They must have got some investment. This product is looking a lot prettier. All right, I guess we got who's coming. All right, so why don't sales staff have administrator rights? That's least privilege. Yep, you only give them the permissions they need. The extra permissions could only get them in trouble. All right, why do you use a ladder instead of climbing on the desks? That's due care. Doing things the smart way instead of the stupid way. All right, janitors leave slippery soap on the floor. What's that? That's gross negligence. Somebody falls down and gets hurt, your company will have trouble explaining why they did that. All right, Joe uses a printer, so what's the printer? It's an object. Joe is the subject and the printer is the object. Okay, good. There's the manual again, good. And NMM, good, I know who that is. And Roman H, all right, good, a new woman. Good. Gotta get my mesh, there it is. All right, we'll do one more section of these and that's it for today. So, security governance principles. So governance is the practices that organize these things, organize all these security processes we've been talking about. So you're trying to maintain business processes and make it so you can grow and be resilient to flaws and problems that come out. So there's a lot of aspects that are imposed from the outside, like regulatory compliance, industry guidelines and license requirements. The government imposes regulations on you. You have compliance standards to meet the standards of certain industries, like if you're going to have a credit card, you have to achieve PCI compliance, and you have license requirements from the software you use that limit what you can do. So these are one of the many things that limit what you can do, and you have to manage them, which is called governance. So you have, these are principles. Security is not an IT issue, it's a management issue. It has some IT involved in it, but it's really a management issue and affects the whole organization. All right, so you're going to try to align your security functions to these different levels of your security controls: strategy, goals, mission, and objectives. So you want to make a business case for these, which is your explanation of why it is worth spending money and resources to accomplish your goals. And that's what I was talking about for an early question. People said, will these principles protect us from a specific attack? And you can't say exactly they will, but you do have to defend what you're doing to your management. You have to convince them it's worth doing this for this reason. You have to make an argument for it, even though you can't have sort of scientific proof. So the chief security officer is the person that runs the information security team. And this is an upper management position. It has to be. This is the thing you'll see over and over again in the CISSP training. If you want to implement a security program, you must have buy-in from top management up in the C-suite. This is a very common mistake. Some junior person at a company gets mad about something, like our passwords are too short or these firewalls aren't set up right or something, and they try to get someone to care and nobody cares. I've been this guy. This is where a lot of security people start out. Then you scream and yell, and they just say, that guy's a lot of bother, I don't even know what he's talking about, and you don't get anywhere. And you cannot implement any change from the bottom. You have to first convince upper level management to support this and then allocate resources to it. So you have to present a business case to upper level management saying, we need to do this for this reason, and convince them. And if you cannot convince them, forget it. You cannot implement security from the bottom. You have to do it from the top because it costs money and staff time and other resources. So very, very many security people know about security flaws at their company, disagree with them, and they can't change them. And you have to get over letting this ruin your life. You just have to accept it. The fact is, I don't own the network. It's their decision that they want to accept this risk. I just make sure they know about the risk, and I put that in writing. So if a bad thing happens, I can say, well, I warned them. But you cannot make something happen unless you're at a high enough position in the organization to have the authority to expend resources to make it happen. And that's the CSO. So you have different levels of plans. There's a strategic plan that goes through many years, like you might decide that you're going to move your company to a multinational company and expand other nations, and it's going to take you years to set that up. Then you have tactical plans that go through just a year, and operational plans to do one little thing, like we're going to upgrade one group of servers to the next version or something like that. These are just different layers. So the strategic plan is long-term, and you'll have risk assessments planning in your planning for that. Then your tactical plans will be things like hiring, system development, acquisitions. You acquire a company and integrate it into your system. And operational plans, little things you might do, changing staffing, opening a new location, that kind of thing. And you'll have detailed plans of exactly how you're going to do that. I actually saw something done very well at this college, which is not that common. A few years ago, we moved to new computers everywhere, and they really did it right. We had a new head of IT, and he did a very good job. He told everybody we were going to switch all the machines to new machines like 6 months in advance, had training sessions. Then he took one minor part of the company and just rolled out the desktops there, and then gradually put them here and here and here, had the help desk organized to handle the problems. That's what you do. You make a plan for a thing like that, and then you implement it carefully, and it runs a lot better. All right, then there's change control. People often want to change things, like there's not a good enough wireless signal in your office, you just want to put up a router. This is something you're not going to be allowed to do at a professional company. You have to, any kind of change, you have to send to the change control board. And so they have to test it and decide whether this change is actually worth it. And then they have to include a rollback plan. When they do a major change, like upgrading a server to the next version of an operating system or Exchange or something, they have to plan to do it, start it, and then if it fails, which it often does fail catastrophically, you go to the next version, it totally doesn't work, it fouls up something all important and you can't figure it out. So you plan enough time to give up and have enough time to roll back to the old one, so that when people come in on Monday morning, you typically do it over the weekend, something is working. Maybe it's the same old thing that was working last week, if you can't get the new one going, but you don't bring the whole company down unnecessarily. That's why you have to have a rollback. This is what frustrates a lot of people about big companies. You want to do something and you can't. You have to get permission, and it's a lengthy, irritating process to get permission. This is what Facebook got fed up with. Facebook totally does not do this. They're proud of being hackers. They do not have any change control process for software. Instead, all you have to do is put it on a mailing list and nobody comments for a few days, then you can just roll it out. But you only roll it out to a small number of users, and then it goes out. They have a plan, so all the developers should be able to just make anything they want with minimum friction. But most companies have quite a lot of friction in change control, because you can mess up the network and mess up the whole system with changing anything, and they have to consider it carefully. And this is required for ITsec classifications of high level, B or A. We'll talk about that a lot more. That's the military orange book. This is the military standard of information security. And it's a common way to measure the level of security of your company, and B and A are the high levels, and you cannot achieve B or A without having a change control system. All right, so you implement the change in a monitored and orderly fashion. You have a formalized testing process to make sure it worked. You have a rollback plan to get back to the old previous state in case it doesn't work. You inform users, you check to make sure if it's working, and you review and approve everything with your change approval board. This is that ponderous bureaucratic process which is necessary at a large company if you want to have security, so your stuff is going to remain reliable even as you make these changes. All right, then data classification. This is all over the news now. Again, every president seems to make the same mistake of mishandling classified data. So you got to decide how important data is to you. and who's allowed to get at it, how you're going to store it, how you're going to destroy it when you're done with it. All these things require labeling it and then handling it in different ways. So you got a custodian. I think you identify the custodian. Custodian is the person who's going to do the work. Then you have criteria, you label your resources, determine exceptions, have controls, have some way to declassify stuff, and have an awareness program so all your personnel knows what to do. If they have classified stuff, it must go in the classified bin for, like, if you're throwing it away for it to be burned, the other stuff can go in this other bin. That's all it was where I worked. I never got military security clearance, but we had confidential documents at my business. And all right, so this is the level government. Military has unclassified, confidential, secret, and top secret. And in business and private sector, you typically just have public, sensitive, or confidential. That's all you have. You don't have anything quite so fancy. But there is confidential stuff which has to be shredded, like your customer records and stuff like that. All right, your senior manager is the person responsible for the security of the organization. This is a common thing that happens. This happened, one of the big companies, I think it might have been Target, I forget, one of the big companies that got hacked about 8 years ago, they tried to blame it on a junior system administrator. They said, that guy didn't put on the patch, and then we got hacked. It's his fault. And that just will not fly. If you're the manager, whatever happens is your fault. If your staff messes up, then why did you hire stupid staff? Why didn't you train them? Why didn't you monitor the results to see what they did? You're responsible for what your staff does. You can't escape responsibility. This is a rule. You can outsource work, but you cannot outsource responsibility. You're still responsible for what happens. The management is responsible for whether you really are secure. And if their staff fouls up, you can fire your staff or prosecute them or something, but it doesn't mean you're still responsible for driving a ship off a cliff. Anyway, so security professionals are people at various levels that implement the policy, the directives they get from above, and they write policies and implement them. And then there's a data owner somewhere, somebody who owns some data and is responsible for taking care of that data, classifying it, and making sure that the handling of that data is consistent with your security policy. The data custodian is the person that actually does the work. The data owner is above the data custodian, setting the rules for the data custodian, who will actually do things like backup, moving things around, destroying things like that. Users are people with access to the system, and an auditor is a special person who checks to make sure that all the security policies are being followed. You can get a CISA, by the way, which is about half of a CISSP. That's a Certified Information Security Auditor. And that's a very good certification to have, and you can get a good job with that. It's kind of dull, but it's steady work. These are the auditors who go to your company and make everybody fill out forms so you can prove that you've really obeyed all these rules. It's not sort of like taxing, but you do need to know all the technical things, and you need to be very organized and very good at persuading people to do things that are kind of annoying, filling out these forms, making sure that they've done all the right things. All right. So 1C. This is the last one for today. All right. Looks like a mouse with a waffle on its head. Most of them look pretty good, though. What does this guy have on his head? I'll wait for the end of the music. What is it?
I'm pretty sure music loops.
Oh, it does. Yes, yes. It does. All right. So which one is useful for a year? tactical plan? All right. All right, so who's ultimately responsible for security? The manager is responsible. Even though other people do the work, the manager's job is to make sure they are doing good work, and they are the right people, and they have all the resources they need. All right, who makes backups? The custodian is the one that actually does the work, making the backup. The owner will set policies and such about how often it should be done and things like that. All right, who produces compliance reports? That's the auditor. Good? Okay. All right, I know who that is. Melissa. Serena. Good. All right, stop the recording.